I think all the films around us, Stephen and that, I find it weird, really.
As comfortable
as it can be.
I don't enjoy it at all.
It looks lovely.
But I think it's important because of how Stephen was killed and also the way in which we were treated as a family.
Want to start in 93.
My son's been murdered and none of these officers, the justice system, the politicians, nobody cared. These idiots who have murdered my son had more rights than we did.
Second camera.
And I'm not doing any filming with you. So it's better be a good one. Also, just to talk about Stephen a bit more. And so people can see that he had a life, not just in death, but before.
Sorry, if you just just so we've got these cutaway shots.
Doreen and Neville, they were just very good, honest people.
Can I just get you to turn a page, please?
Stephen, he was a very ordinary kid. He had this disarmingly big grin. Our peers were black and white. So race was very much something that we were aware of, but it was more something that our parents had fought the good fight to make it less of an issue for us.
We were just at a bus stop in London. We were attacked at a bus stop in one of the greatest cities in the world.
People seem to think I may have moved on and I've got over Stephen's death. I haven't. I don't think I have come through the other end. All I wanted to do is to get justice for Stephen. Growing up in the Caribbean, a lot of people have a pet name that they called. My family would call me Joy, and I didn't know my name was Doreen until I went to school.
Since the early 1950s, coloured immigrants from the Commonwealth have come in much greater numbers. They've come in search of better jobs and a better life for their families.
I understand my mother left when I was about 2, her husband to be sent for her.
20-odd years ago, it was quite rare to see a Negro.
Because you see, when I came in '49, there weren't so many coloured people. Your eyes were geared to looking for a coloured face in the street. The only ones we used to see then were Sikhs. I think that's how you pronounce it.
They create an atmosphere of foreignness.
I never met my mum until I was 9. After my grandmother died, that's when I came here. And I arrived, and I just remember seeing the houses, how close together they were. That was strange. And you see these strangers, because I've never met any of them. So it was my mother and my stepbrother. And when I got here, I had a baby brother. My other siblings were born after that. By the time I got to secondary school, there was quite a large mix of black girls. Most of my friends were black, but I didn't look at it as I'm black and they are white.
In the early days, people from the West Indies was invited to go to England to go and help to rebuild the country after the war. But then found out there was lots of discrimination against people from the West Indies, black people. I found myself working as a tailor. And while I was working in the tailoring trade, I met Doreen's mother, who was also a dressmaker. And while I was doing that, I eventually met Doreen. I kind of liked her.
We used to travel together on the train. That sort of developed from there. And then at lunchtime, I'd leave work because I used to work in Moorgate and go and meet him over at Edgware Road, I think it was. Which was quite a distance to go for meet somebody for lunch.
I saw her the first time I ever think about getting married to somebody.
Looking back on it, I got married 2 weeks after my 20th birthday. Looking back on it now, how would you get married so young? But at the time, in the 70s, that's what happened.
Joy, that's her pet name. She looked beautiful in the photograph.
I never looked like one of those guys from the Four Tops. I never was very tall. And then when Stephen came along, life was fine. Stephen was born 2 years later, and that was a fantastic time. I remember spending so much time teaching him to say mum first. We would do so much stuff together, play together, read, do everything. And his first words was mum. But then he began to call me dad and never mum. Nursery, he loved nursery, and school. Stephen got out of school really well. He was just one of these kids who would just strive at everything. But I was a very strict mum. And he used to say to me, Mum, you care too much.
In the days when I lived next door to Doreen, I just remember that it was really nice to meet a nice family that, had got children the same ages as ours. They all used to play together. We used to do lots and lots of things together.
We all grew up together. So we've never had a thing that, oh, you must be careful because you're black, this could happen to you.
Stephen didn't experience the sense of difference growing up that I experienced. My parents were very political, and being of mixed heritage, I was made to be aware of race and politics and injustice.
13 dead and nothing said.
When the Deptford fire happened, that was a monumental impact. A lot of young black teenagers burnt in a fire.
Local black organisations allege racially motivated arson, and they accuse the police of not pursuing their investigations with full vigour. The police deny this.
It felt like it was the tipping point for people's frustration in the system and in our government. It felt like it was the tipping point for people to kind of rise up
against, Thatcherite Britain. We still had those divisive lines.
I grew up in Deptford. I was going to Blackheath Bluecoat at school. Stephen, who we called Steve, we were in the same class on the first day. He was a cool guy, and everybody loved him. He used to train at Cambridge Harriers. Steve was an excellent athlete.
I just remember him always running. I was very proud because I think he was very good. Athletics was his thing.
I just remember that London felt quite inclusive, actually, felt quite positive, felt quite cosmopolitan. Soul to Soul were telling us to keep on moving, and Public Enemy were telling us to fight the power. But leading up to Stephen's death, and then soon after, I think it changed radically.
Put the British people first. Stop immigration, start repatriation.
Much in the same way that Brexit has changed the nation. It brought back these feelings of maybe I'm not part of this community, maybe I am part of the other, whatever that means.
Extreme right-wing groups like the British National Party are trying to capitalise on the rise in unemployment.
In the areas just outside of London, people resent the fact that immigrants have got jobs and that they haven't got jobs.
Anytime you stepped out the inner city area of London, then you were always, as a black person, under danger and threat in these all-white enclaves that were working-class white suburbs. I was a member of the National Black Caucus at the time. When we came to areas like Eltham, what we saw is a massive escalation of racist attacks of people moved into those areas.
I've been called a nigger every now and again, like walking past the bus stop and someone drove past and shouted out, "Oi, nigger, you should be burnt."
I think it works both ways, like black people don't know white people, so white people don't know black people.
Eltham in those days, people were living in fear, black or Asian people. There were some very, very serious attacks.
This guy called Rodriguez, he was in Eltham Park with a white girl, and that's why he got attacked. And he needed 27 stitches.
Eltham, it felt like the last stronghold of a white community that was holding on to the past, or a perception of the past, some kind of glory days that never existed.
Where I live, Wellhall Road, it's not what it used to be.
I think people would probably like to tell you that they left their doors unlocked. You used to hear that kind of conversation.
My mum used to, in the 30s, in the 40s. But nowadays, you can't. There's so many tea leaves about, which is thieves if you don't know what it is.
I didn't have fond feelings for the place. I didn't feel comfortable there. Thamesmead wasn't that far away, and that felt like a real no-go place to me.
On the 21st of February 1991, Roland Adams, 15-year-old, with his brother Nathan, had gone to Hawksmoor Youth Club. On the way back, confronted by the Goldfish gang, calling them niggers and all that, and stabbed Roland Adams in the neck, and he died at the Boiler House roundabout.
I think Doreen and I got a bit of a shock when the youngsters started to tell us, you know, so-and-so can't go in that area and we can't go in that area, and we just lived in our own little world and didn't really know about these things.
When the economy suffers and goes down, racism always goes up. We decided that we would reach out internationally. Contacted Reverend Al Sharpton.
You came out here because you told the world I was going to be banned. Don't start talking about civilized. Tell us what all the lies that y'all have written.
I remember the front page, I think it was the Daily Mail, which had race hate preacher from hell comes to UK.
I suppose I became more aware of the racist murders when Roland Adams was killed. Even though I used to read stories in the papers, that was closer to home. Stephen said to me they were having a march when Al Sharpton came over from America, and he's telling me he's going. I said, I don't want you to go, because I was more worried about him. But he still went because he felt that he knew Roland and he wanted to be there to support. But I was worried about him all the time while he was there.
Eltham, 25 years ago, there were people carrying knives around at night around that area without any doubt at all.
Norris, Dobson, the air codes, they were actually targeting people.
I was gutting, definitely. They wouldn't have no one taking the piss. I definitely wouldn't back down from a fight.
In the months before the murder of Stephen, there'd been another murder just off the roundabout by the kebab house, Rohit, who went to Chislehurst and Sidcup Grammar School, and he was stabbed by a man from the kebab house.
There was a stabbing in a Wimpy bar in Eltham, and the Air Corps were involved with that. So the police knew about these people already.
I think the Acorts and Norris, they got away with quite a few stabbings. I think Stacey Bennyfield was stabbed.
He was lucky, very lucky, I think, Stacey. And then he killed him, just missed his heart. There was a little confrontation and one of them pulled a knife and stuck it straight in him, as far as I know.
There was a simmering cauldron of unrest around race issues. The Metropolitan Police I inherited in 1993 was underperforming, and I knew that race relations in London were going to be a huge challenge.
Tolerant of racially motivated attacks.
And that's why, when I became commissioner, I chose as my first speech the importance of race and diversity and justice
as the tools of their political expression.
When Stephen got older and he had a job, I used to say to him, do be careful when you're coming home this late at night.
I was watching people going to work. He saw me looking through the window, and he stopped and said to me, Dad, are you okay? And I said, yes. I said, okay, Dad. And I watched him walk out of the house down to this turning and turned through the alleyway, and that was the last time I saw him alive.
I went to meet him after school. We then went to his uncle's house. Steve wanted to get home because he hadn't seen his mum all that week. So we took a bus into Eltham, bus stop across the road from McDonald's.
That is your time, trust me.
286 came past us. So I just started running and then we got on the bus.
Yeah, but Stephen, man, we could all be going out clubbing and all that.
And then we took that bus to the bus stop just before the roundabout.
You always should complain about something else, man. If we get the bus from over there, it's just common sense, it'll be quicker, I don't lie.
I was an au pair near Woolwich. I was waiting at the bus stop, so I had time to watch them or to look at them. They were chatting and they were joyful and lively, and they were doing dance steps on the pavement, and I felt, wow, they look very cool. And Stephen went to look at the timetable.
122 or 161?
122, man.
How long?
If we'd known that the bus was going to take so long, the 122 to come, we would have just jogged it. So I'm quite agitated about being there at that time of night because people will drive past and throw things at you, shout abuse. I remember him and I having this discussion about, can you see a bus? And then we both were walking too near the roundabout because we wanted to see if another bus was going to come. If straight ahead of me is 12 o'clock where Stephen's standing, then at 10 o'clock, I remember this group of white boys on the other side of the road shouting, and then one of them said, what nigger? As he started to run across the road, he was pulling stuff out of his pocket, out of his trousers, and he couldn't run properly, and he just came. The whole group started running, and I shouted to Steve to run.
She ran!
And I just saw this guy strike a downward blow, which I thought was a weapon.
I was watching television and I heard a scream or a shout, and it was an unusual scream or shout.
No, come on, man! Come on, Steve, man! Come on! I'm telling you, coming back, come on!
Stephen stood up and started to run and leaving his rucksack back. And so I felt, wow, he's okay, he's fine, he's running fast.
Everybody come back, but I'm saying you! But they're coming, come on! Come on, Steve! Come on, just keep running!
He wasn't running properly, he was running lopsided, and he kept saying to me, Dwayne, like, what's happened to me? And I just kept saying to him, let's just run.
Just keep running with me, Brad. Come on with me. No, Steve, man. Come on, please. I'm going to get up. Come on, sit down, fella. Come on, man. Come on. No, please. No.
I ran across the road. I saw these two people, and I asked them for their help, and they just walked past me.
Help me.
I tried to stop cars in the road, no cars were stopping. I went to the phone box and I dialed 999.
Ambulance, please, man! Ambulance, I need an ambulance, man!
And I gave the address in the phone box, but the address in the phone box was incorrect.
I don't know the fucking phone's gone!
I remember that a car pulled up, some people came out, and he said to me, what's happened? I told him that he'd been hit by iron bar. But at that time I didn't know that he wasn't hit with an iron bar, that he'd been stabbed in those places. I didn't know any of that. I'm not defending the police at all. But I think that also confused the police that turned up because they were expecting to see someone hit with an iron bar.
He's still breathing, yeah?
It's all right, it's okay.
Where's the ambulance? Well, I said for the ambulance to the fucking police.
This boy is bleeding very
The
badly.
police were being unhelpful. Steve was just lying there bleeding to death. I always remember seeing that.
They just ran out and hit him with an iron bar.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Why would they do that, Dwayne?
The ambulance comes, and when they pick him up, they turn him over and pick him up. He is completely soaked in his own blood.
Yeah, if you could just stay out of the way, please. Thank you.
I was away, my first time going away with my course. When I came back, Neville was waiting for me where the coach dropped us off down in Woolwich. So, you know, you ask the question, how's the kids? I know they're doing, everybody seems to be fine. Stephen's not home.
Well, I did tell him that you were coming home tonight, so...
But that wasn't unusual, so I wasn't worried.
Stuart.
I got dressed in my night clothes. They went to have something to eat.
Did Stephen say where he was going?
No.
And it's just while we were sitting there watching the news, you heard the door knock. And because I was in my night clothes, Neville went to answer the door. I saw Joey, who lives at the back, and his dad. Joey just said that there's an incident happened down Well Hall Road. Called 999. They don't know anything. So that's when we got in the car and went looking for him.
You said Well Hall Road, innit?
That's as far as we went, Well Hall Road. And I saw no flashing lights, nothing to draw us to that area. So we just thought, well, he's gone to the hospital, so let's go to the hospital, which is what we did. When we got there, Neville went to park the car and I walked in. And I didn't see anybody. Even though Dwayne was there, I didn't even notice him.
Neville.
It was only when Neville came in that Neville noticed him and noticed the police officer.
I'm Stephen's dad.
Okay. Mr. Lawrence, Stephen's being looked after. Harriet here is going to look after you, and we'll let you know, yeah?
Would you like to follow me to the family room?
They ushered us into a room, and Dwayne came in, and he just wasn't talking. He wasn't talking. You sort of sit there thinking, okay, what am I supposed to do now? The nurse or doctor came in to say that Stephen had died.
What?
No. That can't be right.
That's not true.
It still seems so unreal.
It's something hard when somebody tells you that because you think you're watching a play or a drama. It's not real. It wasn't real.
Because when I looked at him, he had a cut on his face. But he just looked as if he was sleeping. They had a tape around his neck. The gown came up to right here. You could still see the tape that they'd put on his neck. I stayed with him for a while. And then we went back out. And then other families started coming.
We eventually decided to go home because we didn't know what else to do. So we went home. Stuart came downstairs and we told him. But Georgina, we didn't wake her. So the morning she woke up, I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep at all. And she must have heard, but I don't know what she heard that Neville said on the phone. And she just ran upstairs screaming. So then I had to go out to her. And it's like, how do you hold her?
I spent the whole night in the police station. I was consistently questioned about the what nigger. Was that, you sure that wasn't a nickname? You sure you didn't hear wrong? Didn't Steve have other nicknames that other people would have called him by? No. Are you sure you heard that? Yes.
My name's Ian Crampton. I was a detective superintendent and got called out to the scene of Stephen's death. It was a stabbing, I was told at that time, and the victim had died. On my way, I called at the Plumstead police station where Dwayne was. I learnt from Dwayne that it was a stranger attack. He'd seen Stephen being struck and went down on the floor. A stranger attack is always a little more difficult because you haven't got people knowing one another, which in many cases leads to some sort of motive.
An 18-year-old boy has been stabbed to death. Stephen
The Friday, we were then introduced to two officers who were supposed to be liaison officers to come and help us, and then end up with pen and paper taking down the names of my friends and relatives who came to help us.
I'm sorry, who are these people?
Oh. My name is Marianne Jean-Baptiste, and I played Doreen Lawrence.
Hello.
The film The Murder of Stephen Lawrence followed the family very closely. There is a helplessness in there that you get up and you keep going. Because we've done it for generations, black women. You just have to keep going.
Stephen Lawrence died, stabbed at a bus stop in Eltham. His father has called for the return of the death penalty.
I think they should bring back hanging, something like this. It's a senseless murder. I had to go on TV and do appeal for witnesses. And I was then told that Crampton was only going to do the case until Monday. Why would you want to take over a case for only 2 days?
This was not by choice. At that stage, it needed somebody that was going to be the SIO to be there full time. I had other commitments at court. It was something that there was no way that you could get round.
That's a big one. That is a huge bomb.
The column of smoke rising above the city skyline left Londoners in little doubt about the size of the blast.
The Saturday, there was a major IRA bomb in London, the Bishopsgate bomb, and my focus was preventing London being bombed by terrorists. If I'm honest, that was my primary focus day to day.
So many rumours were flashing about, you know, somebody called somebody a black name and a fight happened. Who knows? I never heard nothing. I just heard a shout or a scream.
Obviously there was names flying about and everyone seemed to think it was the same people. But I don't need to be blurting out people's names in here. You know what I mean? You never know what's going to come from that.
On the Saturday morning when I got in, I was made aware that there were phone calls coming in, naming people, but not saying how they knew. Many of the calls were of a similar nature, as if a rumour's going round and people are phoning in the rumour they've heard. Later that morning, I was informed of letters that had been left in a telephone box. Someone had found it, and then subsequently, police had gone up to that area to retrieve the letter. And when they come back, this is my recollection of it, another letter had been put on the window screen of their car, saying the people responsible for the murder of Stephen and other stabbings that had occurred, that they were involved in. At no stage at that point had we got any actual evidence. Somebody had called in at the police station or was given the name of Grant as a pseudonym, gave information, and obviously information isn't evidence. There is a distinct difference. The strategy was not to arrest. There were juveniles. You had to handle juveniles very carefully, obviously. To get them in, to simply release them, wasn't really making a lot of sense.
When Stephen was murdered, where was the support from the authorities? It wasn't there, and that's why we needed to exist. In the Greenwich area, Orville Blair, Roland Adams, Rohit Dougal, this was the fourth. They were allowing them to carry on in this violent, disordered way, and they weren't protecting us.
The house is beginning to fill up with people who I don't know. I spent all my time crying, so I wasn't talking to anybody, so I have no idea where they came from.
Doreen, we had to call the doctor in to give her something to calm her down. She wasn't able to cope because she was so distraught.
We would never known to go to a solicitor. And even with somebody that came to the house on the Sunday.
I was in my office, High Street practice, when I got a call saying there'd been a murder in South East London and could I get over there straight away.
I think what we need to do first, Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence, is to try and get some more background information.
There were two family liaison officers.
Where he went and who with and so on.
When I first met them, it was obvious from the way that they were asking questions that they were there to obtain information.
Well, the names of Stephen's best friends, perhaps, so.
They weren't coming to us and saying, we've got this evidence and we were just going through what we've got. They weren't doing any of that.
But why are you asking about black kids? It was killed by white kids, right?
No, we know that, Miss Mark.
What was troubling at the time is that on the Sunday,
do you recognise
the family liaison officers were asking about some gloves that they'd found.
They were found at the scene.
Why did they need to know about these gloves?
Did Stephen have a pair of gloves like these?
What are you implying? Are you implying that my son was a cat burglar?
Perhaps he might have recently acquired them to wear them when he went out at night.
They're not Stephen's.
We got the impression that if you're black, you must be a thief. If you're black, you must be into drugs. You know, you're a criminal.
So I had to tell them to leave my house and don't come back.
By the Sunday, the information we had on the attackers was basically the same. Nothing to take us any further at that time. A surveillance was going to be put onto them the next day, which I'd arranged, with a view to perhaps get some evidence of association, get to see what they looked like, whether they went to any other addresses. I was under that impression that was going to be occurring on the Monday morning. But it wasn't until later Monday the photographer was there and took photographs of somebody coming out of the address with black bin liners. But they apparently never had a telephone with them or a radio to get in touch with anybody. And the surveillance team hadn't turned up on that at that occasion for whatever reason. But by then, of course, I wasn't aware of any of this, and I'd gone off the inquiry.
Do we know who this chap is? Detective Superintendent Crampton. His role was taken over by Detective Superintendent Whedon.
Surely, I mean, if you know the motive is racial, you should be already looking for racialists.
I can understand it may seem quite a simple matter to say, yes, go and look for racialists, but of course, it's rather more complex than that.
No.
The neighbourhood got involved instantly.
People on the estate know who they are.
They'd done other acts of violence. I think they were kind of terrorising the community.
What's your name, mate? Listen, I'm really, you know what I mean, I can't tell you that.
We had information that people were trying to give to the police. There were actual addresses given that were ignored.
The letter that I wrote on the Monday was, can you tell us what's happening? What happened in the incident? What are you doing about it? It was a straightforward, inquisitorial letter. And it's unanswered. You write another letter and it's unanswered. I had no information to go on. The message was coming back to the Lawrences that Dwayne wasn't being treated well by the police. They had real concerns about him.
I'd like to speak to the officer in charge of the Stephen Lawrence inquiry.
I had no information to go on. I was ringing the police.
You see the problem, Mr. Whedon?
Trying to get information and meeting a brick wall.
All they'd like to know is when you plan to make arrests.
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Justice!
When do we want it?
Now!
Hundreds of people have taken part in a vigil in southeast London tonight in protest against race attacks.
Now there is anger that has strengthened their resolve to help find Stephen's killers.
One murder, 2 murder, 3 murder, 4 murder is more than enough. We can't take any more of it, and something has got to be done. And enough is enough.
I think Neville, to me at least, felt like he almost became monosyllabic. I don't think I really heard him speak much after that. He's the sort of guy that would chuckle a lot, and that just ended. But the grief, the sense of grief, it was really hard to be around Doreen after that, because it was so palpable. The waves of grief radiating off of her, and the pensiveness. It's not easy to be around. It's not something that you can never really get used to. In later life, I've experienced death of loved ones. My dad passed away a few years ago. It's not the same. It's harrowing, but also the outrage, the realization that we don't live in this fairy tale world that we've created for ourselves. It came crashing in.
Stephen is regarded as the 4th young victim of racial murder here in the past 2 years.
We have talk and we have talk. And I'm saying the talking is over. Now it's time for action. We have to take we have to deal with it ourselves. I mean, we're saying...
What does action mean, though? What kind of action?
Action means by any means necessary.
The senior policeman who runs this area was telling me today that the advice he'd give you lot is to think seriously about joining the police force. He hasn't got enough. Do you have a good relationship with the police?
No. Can't trust them brothers, man. They pick you up for nothing. All jacking you up and shit just because you're black. Ain't you right, man?
In the old days, trying to get the police to treat something as a racist crime was almost impossible. You'd have to have somebody say, my motivation in doing this is because I'm a racist. That is what you'd need. This is years, decades, centuries of culture that has as part of its DNA an assumption about the black communities.
When you were black and you were a victim of crime and you called the police, the tendency was that the police somehow would start to investigate you. And everybody understood it, everybody knew it.
We can go as far back as the 50s, 70s, the 80s with the Brixton riots, you know. The same thing keeps coming up. We're not being treated fairly. We're not being treated fairly. What is that, a chip on the shoulder? Is that stuff just the imagination? The unsolved murders, you know, of black youths, someone's imagination? Come on.
I found it hard speaking to people because I needed help. And there was nobody to help that had experienced what I had experienced. I was treated as a person that didn't have any feelings because I was just a main witness, What the fuck does a main witness mean to anybody?
The rumors that we heard was that Dwayne ran away and left Stephen. And in our early days, nobody would run away and leave the other.
I don't know. I don't know why he didn't run. But he was always of the view that if he didn't do anything wrong to anybody, then he wouldn't run from something like that. For me, I'm not taking that kind of chance because danger is danger.
He knows he's forever will be the man that ran away and left his mate. He knows that. And I think Mrs. Lawrence hasn't forgiven him. They've never spoken, have they, since? No, they haven't.
I wanted to hear from him what had happened, and he's never spoken to me.
You want him to have the answers. You want to make sense of the madness. And in that, you maybe forget that he's just a teenage boy that was running for his life.
We're supposed to have our trust in them and we think they're doing a wonderful job. But that's just a joke, because I don't believe they're doing a wonderful job.
Them times I was really angry because all the stories that you've heard of what happened to young black men, and then you begin to think about, had he been white?
They would have surrounded the black community. They would have arrested as many black boys as they could. and they would not stop until they get the killer.
But for Stephen, they're hoping that, you know, I would just shut up and go away.
United we stand and divided we fall, and that's how it should be. We should be united.
One of the liaison officers said, if you was to come down to the police station, you see all the work and all the stuff that we're doing. And I asked, why would I need to do that? It's your job. They weren't giving us information. People came and gave us the boys' names. Those are the only things that we knew.
We've been getting calls. If they're telling us, I'm sure they must be telling you.
We need evidence, Mrs. Lawrence.
Show him.
Hard information.
I just got a bit of paper and I wrote all the names down and I handed the paper to this officer. And I sat there and I would listen to all the discussion that was going on. And in the meantime, he would just fold the paper up, oblivious to me being there. And he folded it and he folded and he folded it. So as I was walking out the door, I said, you're going to put that in the bin now, aren't you? And that's when he realised that I was watching him.
No, I'm seriously thinking that we're better off living in a community where we're surrounded more with blacks.
Isn't there a danger that in doing that, though, that you polarise the whole situation so it becomes us and them, which
So
is exactly what you do?
what else can we do? Because the police are not really protecting our kids.
To make this work for the news media, you have to deliver up some photo opportunities. The South African exile living in Britain phoned me up and said, Nelson Mandela is coming to London. Would you like him to meet Doreen and Neville? And of course I said, hell yes.
Remember, the door opened and I saw this tall, elegant-looking man come in. And I'm thinking, I'm in a dream.
We brought over Nelson Mandela to energise the white community. The contrast between the failure of British domestic politicians and the willingness of Nelson Mandela to become involved, I think, tells its own story.
We are very used to this type of thing where life is regarded as cheap in South Africa. But nevertheless, it's a sense of disconcern that it should happen in a country like Britain.
Your tragedy is our tragedy.
Getting Mandela on board changed it from a local story to a national story. More importantly, the next day were the arrests.
Today, they raided 2 addresses in South London.
So without him, those first arrests would never have happened.
I honestly don't believe there was any linkage between Nelson Mandela or anything he said and the timing of the arrests.
With the same amount of information that they had from when they was telling that they can't arrest, they arrested these guys the days after.
Because of the sensitivity surrounding this case, the police are saying little about the people they're questioning.
They didn't tell us about the arrest. We saw it on the local news. So anything that we wanted to know about how the investigation was happening, we'll see it on the news when they so choose to do something.
And you are? Jamie Arthur Akel. You've been arrested in connection with the murder of Stephen Lawrence. Do you remember the night, the 22nd of April? No comment. When your house was searched this morning, in your room, 2 knives were found. Tell me why you've got those knives? No comment.
Can you give me a full name, please?
Neil Charles Akel.
Today you stood on an identification parade and you were picked out by Dwayne Brooks. What have you got to say about that?
No comment.
Why do you go around stabbing people?
No comment.
Or is it anybody who wants to be a friend with you has to prove themselves by stabbing somebody?
No comment.
David Allen Norris.
Are you going to tell us where you were that night?
No reply.
Do you remember that night?
No reply.
I'm told by Stacey Benefield, you pulled a miniature sword, he describes it as. You said, shut up, you cunt, and then stabbed him in the chest. You have anything to say about that?
No reply. My name's Gary George Dobson. Someone's obviously trying to point a finger at me.
Well, someone definitely has pointed a finger at you, more than one person, son.
That makes me look like I don't look like blacks.
Have we suggested it was a racist attack?
No, that's what the paper's saying, it.
Personally, I don't think there was a particularly racist attack. I think it's incidental. I'll stop the recorder.
I remember everyone was extremely angry. And there's going to be this demonstration down at BNP. Our time for revenge.
Roland Adams, dead. Last year they murdered Rohit Dugal in Altham in Walhall Road. Another person has been murdered, Stephen Lawrence, on the same road, in Walhall Road.
The Black Panthers came to see me and they said, would I lead the march they're calling to close the BNP headquarters.
What are we going to do tonight?
Tonight, anti-race groups are calling on Bexley Council to close down the British National Party's headquarters at Welling.
I had decided that I didn't want to be part of any kind of march. Dwayne had approached and asked if we wanted to be down there, and I said no.
I know that I was angry, and I know that I wanted to go, and I was there. Anything that was associated with racism, because Steve was killed, was a target.
In the front of the march was Dwayne Brooks, and that's the day Dwayne was seen to overturn a BMW car that day.
We were attacked as black militants who had hijacked this poor, grieving family, and the Daily Mail was in the forefront of that negative reporting.
I saw the picture of the family meeting Mandela in the middle of this. I kind of was taken back by the fact that the paper had seen it fit to put us in the middle of all this violence when we had nothing to do with it. So the Daily Mail sent some journalists to do a story. And I said to him, who is the editor? And he said, Paul Dacre. And I said, oh. And he said to me, do I need to get the number? And I said, no. And he said, why not? I said, well, I have it.
We bought a house that needed a lot of work doing. I think one of the neighbours recommended that Neville Lawrence was a very good plasterer. He came and did some plastering for the house. I remember this very quietly spoken man, very sensitive man.
He apologized and said to me, Mr. Lawrence, I didn't realize it was your son.
I said, well, look, if you want to put the record straight, give us an interview. And sure enough, a couple of days later, the Mail carried a full exclusive interview with Dorian and Neville. He made it very clear that he didn't want to have anything to do with the protests.
Various different factions were trying to co-opt what was happening. Although people seemed to be suggesting that they wanted to be supportive, it didn't feel like that. It felt like jackals feeding on a carcass.
Yes, there were tensions. Lots of anti-racist organisations jockeying for pole position.
When we had criticism, we withdrew.
Hold on, at the end of the day, the Lawrence family wrote to you and told you literally to get lost.
And it's not to say that their causes weren't just, they were, but we just need to maintain our focus on Stephen's attackers.
Arriving at court this morning, the 17-year-old charged with the murder of Stephen Lawrence.
It was a positive moment. You know, there was some confidence thinking that we're going to get somewhere.
It seemed to be closing the chapter because I couldn't do any more now. This was it. We'd achieved our objective, they were arrested, and then they were charged.
The Lawrences are appealing for calm at tomorrow's memorial service at their local church. They say Stephen will be buried in Jamaica next month because Britain doesn't deserve him.
It's another one of those numb days. You just go through the motion. You know, you just go through the motion of being there. For me, it's just making sure everybody knew Stephen was killed. Everybody needs to know what happened to my son. Police asked if they could come to the service, and I said, no, we don't want you in there. To me, why?
My coping mechanism was to distance myself from personal. I almost placed myself as a steward, that as a pallbearer at the funeral. I've always been very proud of being from a mixed heritage. I've always been very proud of both sides of my culture, of being black and white, and that never changed. But it was tested, absolutely tested.
Many of us feel ashamed to be white.
I still hadn't accepted the fact that Stephen was dead. When you read the Bible, it tells you, in the days of Moses and the Pharaoh, one of the punishments that used to be dished out was if you did something wrong, you lose your firstborn. And so I'm thinking maybe I done something wrong.
When I got the papers, 2 suspects who'd been charged and they were due to be committed for trial. The evidence presented to us in the summer of 1993 involved only one real issue, and that was of identification. Was there sufficient quality identification evidence to carry the case forward? The only real identifying witness was Mr. Dwayne Brooks, and all that he could say was that they were white, they were wearing jeans, and were young. A fleeting glimpse. That by itself made the evidence very, very weak. And that already weak evidence was further undermined by a conversation that Dwayne had with an officer called Sergeant Crowley.
Look carefully, and if you do recognize anyone.
On the third ID parade, I was picked up by Sergeant Crowley. That particular time, I picked out Luke Knight, and I remember Crowley, in his statement, he said that I had told him that I was picking out suspects based on descriptions given to me by friends. And Crowley's statement was used to discredit me.
I don't remember a case where a conversation following an identification parade had such a dramatic effect. Dwayne originally denied the accuracy of Sergeant Crowley's statement, but when a statement was taken from Dwayne Brooks to explain it, he himself did accept that he had been given some information. And it seemed to me the case was, in layman's terms, virtually hopeless. No lawyer of any competence could have said we had enough.
2 teenagers accused of murdering the black schoolboy Stephen Lawrence have been released from custody after the Crown Prosecution Service ruled there was insufficient evidence against them.
I was so angry, so angry.
A black boy's got to the age of 18. He hasn't got a criminal record. He's not into drugs. He's not into carrying knives. He doesn't hang about the street corners. He's a studious person. He goes to school and to college. They can't accept that.
I just had enough. I just really, really had enough. And I was gone.
You see, Darren?
I never started ringing around, trying to find out where I am.
No, because she said that she would be home by 3 o'clock.
And nobody knew where I was. I didn't tell anybody either. They were out looking for me.
So what makes you think she'd gone to Wellhall Road?
Well, I don't know whether she's gone to Wellhall Road.
Yeah, well, look. On the right over there, look.
You know, I just needed to think and question what's going on.
I think the worst possible thing that can happen to a mother happened to her. So what more could be done? I mean, there's a fearlessness that comes with that. That's sort of like, okay, you've done the worst thing possible, so now this is nothing taking you on.
The killers are still out on the street. My son had a future, and they've taken that away. And I just feel as if they were laughing at us. There's nobody, I think, who looked to pacify me. Nobody could tell me no. I presume they could, but I wouldn't accept it. I wouldn't accept it.
I think it's October. I got arrested for violent disorder in a demonstration against the BNP.
Mr. Brooks, we're arresting you on suspicion of causing criminal damage on May the 8th of this year.
I think an officer who by chance was on one of the identification parades basically said he recognized Dwayne Brooks as being involved in the wedding riots.
My name is Jane Dighton, and I am Dwayne Brooks' solicitor. There we have the victim of a violent, murderous, racist attack being prosecuted for violent disorder, whereas the original perpetrators of the attack, not a single one of them was being prosecuted.
I'm sorry, but that's riotous behaviour,
and Dwayne was on camera with others overturning a car.
If you have a key witness commits a serious offence, what are the police and the prosecution to do?
What they were doing, in effect, was gnawing away at the reliability and credibility of one of their own key witnesses.
It's the system, the institution, society. Every time you wanted the case moved forward, something would happen in the Met Police that meant it moved backwards. And Dwayne's arrest and his treatment by the police gave the impression there was a deliberate attempt by the authorities to completely undermine his evidence forevermore.